Welcome to EdHeroes Voices, where we explore inspiring stories and impactful initiatives in education, culture, and social development. I'm your host, Alina Baimen, the CEO and co-founder of EdHeroes, and today we have a really exciting guest. This episode will take us on a journey through the rich cultural landscape of Peru and the amazing work being done to supporting indigenous communities. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. So our guest today is Sara Mitchell. Sara is the partnership manager of Amantani and the EdHeroes Peru hub leader. She's also a volunteer at the UN Women's Spain. She was raised in Peru and is now based in Spain. Sara has an MC in poverty reduction policies from SOAS and over 10 years of experience in fundraising and coordinating social development projects. Welcome, Sara. We're really thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Alina. I'm really happy to be here.
Amazing. So let's start a little bit from the questions. You were raised in Peru and now you live in Spain. Could I ask a little bit about your background and on your journey that led you to education and to your current role with Amantani and EdHeroes?
Yeah, so I think growing up in Peru and being exposed to so many different cultures and groups of people and attending a bilingual school, I think I was also very lucky to travel with my family, visit different communities around the country. And I think from a very young age, I was quite aware of the inequality, particularly with access to education. And as the years went by, I tried to get involved as much as I could in social projects and trying to understand how they work. And I guess when I realized I could then dedicate the next stage of my life, my academic life, into studying about development, about social development, about how I could then return back to what I very much consider to be my country, even though I was born in the UK, and try to put some of that into working alongside communities and people and developing social projects, particularly again with education. I think I would probably have a very different response or be a very different person had I not grown up in a country like Peru. And the reason why I ended up choosing to work in social development has everything to do with the people that I met growing up and the access I had to visiting these people from so many different cultures and backgrounds.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can I ask what specifically in your background inspired you to your passion in education and what kind of people?
I'm actually not entirely sure if there's anything specific. I think Peru is an extremely diverse country. We have the coastal region, we have the Andes, we have the Amazon. And I think my family were always very keen to make sure that both my brother and I visit as many of these different corners of the country as possible and get to know people, experience something slightly different to our day-to-day living in the capital city, going to a bilingual school, and having these different cultural exchanges, hearing different languages, seeing about the different textiles they were weaving, their music, the food. And I think being exposed to such a diversity from such a young age really opened my eyes into wanting to learn more. I've always been very inquisitive. And I think that once I was able to just actually sit down and read about it and get involved in what international development really is, and then broaden my views outside of Peru, I would just get so excited about the thought of all these different cultures around the world, not just in Peru. So I think that all of that, alongside, again, my very inquisitive nature, it all made sense, I think, to try and focus on how I could go away, learn a little bit about developing social projects, and then hopefully come back to my country or wherever it is I'm at and work alongside other people that are equally passionate about it.
That's really amazing. And since we got into the topic of how you're raised and your family, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Peru, because I'm sure that not all of our listeners are familiar with Peru, with the background, with what it's like. Can you share some maybe cultural aspects that you think people would find fascinating?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because I think this question would have probably had a very different answer 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Peru is a lot more on the map than it used to be. I think Machu Picchu, of course, becoming a wonder of the world many years ago, definitely increased tourism. And it's very well known now for its cuisine and having some of the best restaurants in the world. I think that more and more people realize that Peru is somewhere where you don't just visit for 1 day or 2 days. There are so many different parts of the country to visit. Again, like I was saying, the coast, the Andes, where we work, in the Amazon, where our projects are also located. It's one of the most biodiverse countries on the planet, and it has some very interesting facts. Peru has over 4,000 varieties of potato, which I always find such an interesting statistic, because people maybe don't know these sorts of things, or that the Amazon River originates in Peru. And those are just small facts that actually are quite representative of how diverse the country is. And I think nowadays more people know about Peru. I think more people visit, which is fantastic for the country. But again, I think it's something that's only really just been happening in the last decade or so.
Wow. I think Peru's been on a lot of people's bucket lists, travel bucket lists for a while, but there's truly so much. And I had no idea about potatoes. I didn't know that there is that many types of potatoes generally. It's really fascinating. I wonder, do they taste very different from each other?
I definitely have not tried 4,000 varieties of potato, but I can confirm that I've tried several. This is more specific to the Andean region, of course, potato being the main crop as well that comes from the region. But it is amazing. So many different colors and shapes of potatoes, which is why, again, it's part of so many local dishes. But yeah, it's one of those interesting facts, but it would be hard to come across all 4,000 in one go for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess it's also because it grows at higher altitudes, and that's where a lot of the Peruvian landscape is.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you go to the Amazon, the variety of fruits and vegetables and different plants that you'll find are just completely opposite to those in the Andean regions, where it's just a lot more dry. Again, very, very high altitude. Peru has the highest navigable lake in the world as well. It's called Lake Titicaca. It's shared with Bolivia. It's again a very important site on the tourist trail for people visiting Peru. But seriously, the climates are just so diverse that it lends itself to, again, a wide range of production in agriculture.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot that people really don't know about the diversity in Peru. Do you think there's a lot of myths or misconceptions about Peru right now that we could debunk?
I think for me, something that comes to mind is that potentially people have this idea of Peru being quite a homogeneous sort of society, where maybe there's one culture or one specific language, one race, one set of beliefs. And I think that one of the things that I find myself repeating to people all the time is that Peru really is extremely diverse in all of those senses. There are more than 40 indigenous languages in Peru. Fair enough, Spanish is definitely the language that is vastly spoken across the country, but it depends on where you are. And the deeper you go in some rural areas, these indigenous language are predominant. And that, again, shapes the different cultures and their different beliefs. And again, it has an impact on race, religion, culture. And I think that is something that I make sure I always let people know. And it's not just this one idea of maybe something they've seen on TV or been told by friends and family that might have visited. So I think it's a lot more diverse in every possible way.
Well, that makes sense. And Amantani also works in different regions of Peru, right? Some of it in the Andes and some of it in the Amazon. So what makes the needs of people in the Andes different from those in the Amazon? Perhaps educational needs as well that you work with?
Yeah, I think that's very important to point out, because sometimes when, especially from a social development practitioner side, sometimes we have this idea that we've developed a social project, an educational project that's extremely successful or that we feel very strongly about, and then we try and replicate. And one of the biggest issues, also I'd say it's a challenge, but it's also one of the exciting elements of our work, is that we do have to make sure that we adapt these to every cultural context. And that has a lot to do with cultural heritage in each part of, well, in every area that we work with. In the Andes, they speak different languages. They have, again, different cultural and traditional beliefs. In the Amazon, it is a completely different story. They have even more varieties of different indigenous languages. Geographically, they are completely different. In the Andes, we can access the communities we work with by road, albeit a bit of a treacherous road, but it's a road in itself. And then in the Amazon, we have to access them by boat. Sometimes it can take 6, 7, 8 hours to access the first community we work with. So there is a huge difference in how we approach our projects. And that is also what makes them so valuable, because they have taught us a lot about how they believe our projects work best in their communities and based on their way of life and their traditional aspects. And I think that that can be applied to indigenous communities from around the world. This isn't just Peru. I think that that's what makes it so rich and so interesting, but again, so challenging, because it is really our role to make sure that we are including these aspects in every element of our construction of social projects. So I think that it's hard to point just one particular difference between these two regions. I'd say that there are too many to even start listing, but fundamentally, they are really what should be at the very, very center of our development of social projects.
Yeah, I mean, totally makes sense. And now you're living in Spain, which is also completely different, a different part of the world. Do you think there's many difference or even similarities between Peru and Spain?
It's very interesting, because when I first moved here, you have this conception of, oh, well, they speak Spanish, so surely very easy. It'll just, from day one, I'll fit right in. And again, cultural heritage, how do we identify ourselves, and how we experience every place based on where we come from is so significant. And we, of course, we share the language in Spain, but there are so many differences. Even in language, some words are just so different to the words that we use in Peru to describe the same things. So there's that side of it, which is the more practical side of learning. I'd say that Spanish people are a lot more direct in the way they speak. I think that Latin Americans in general have a way of being extremely charismatic and almost they have a way with words, I'd say, a lot more than people in Spain. But there are the Peruvian population in this country is massive. It has to be surely top 3 populations of immigrants in this country. So wherever you turn, there's a Peruvian shop or a Peruvian restaurant or a Peruvian market. So that has to be one of the perks of living here, is I'm never too far away from a Peruvian, and more importantly, Peruvian food. So that is fortunately something that has migrated and is very representative, I think, nowadays of how intercultural Spain is as well.
Yeah, I guess that really speaks a lot. We're touching up a lot on cultural heritage and how Spain was influenced by Peru, and not only vice versa, because I think in the global scene, it seems like Spain has influenced a lot of Latin America, but it's actually right now also vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. Spain, with the colonization of the Incan Empire, and just mostly, and if not all of that region, back in, I think it was the 16th century, it's interesting to see as well when you go to different parts of the Andes, even Cusco, where our first project was born. The Spanish influence in architecture, in religion. I mean, Peru became a Catholic country after the colonization of the Incan Empire. So I think that there are so many elements that have clearly been a big part of what Peru looks like today. But I think it's interesting to look at how Peru has also influenced Spain now, because it's when you speak to people in this country, they all know about Peru, not just based on history, but also there is a certain connection that Spain has with Latin America that goes beyond history, and it's an interest in dance, in music, in art, in food, in just generally in people. And I think that that's a really nice way of revisiting history, right? Looking at it as as such an important way of how maybe two countries or two regions that a long, long time ago would have maybe been at enemies or at war are now somehow melting their cultures together. And I think that that's something that I've really appreciated about being here.
That's amazing. And you can definitely see the mix of a lot of those cultures in you as well. UK, Peru, Spain. And I guess that's what we consider citizens of the world. And that's what we want to highlight with EdHeroes as well. And so with EdHeroes, you were involved, with EdHeroes, it was such an interesting kind of collaboration and how it came to be. Can you tell us a little bit on why you chose to get involved with EdHeroes and maybe a little bit about the work that Amantani does?
Yeah, so I think our relationship with EdHeroes was born about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. And it actually came through a third-party organization that I had initially contacted, just because we aligned with our projects and our educational goals. And it was them who must have already known you personally, and they recommended us to you. And that's how, again, connections and introductions, and that's how we got to know about EdHeroes and vice versa. And for me, I think one of the things that's been so special about connecting with EdHeroes is that a lot of the time in social development work, you don't always come across groups of people who are so aligned and that believe fully in what you're doing in trying to make education more accessible, in increasing the quality of education that's available, in learning from other organizations, other people, from all different corners of the world. And that is something that I find fascinating. And sometimes when you work in such a small project and in one specific country, it's hard to make those connections and to get to know all these other people that have similar goals and objectives in work. And that for me has been really something that I've taken away from working with EdHeroes. And again, it's been like I've known you guys for years, and that's what it feels like. It's just always been so easy to communicate and work with you. In terms of what we do as projects, our project started 16 years ago. We started off with a very small project in the district of Cauca in Cusco in Peru. We started with a small boarding house for a small group of young girls who were walking up to 8 hours a day to get to the only available school in the district. And then over the course of 10 years, we grew our boarding house project to include boys, a much larger number of children and teenagers. Our goal really was to make sure that children and young people were able to, first of all, access school, but secondly, graduate from school, actually complete secondary school, because that is a real problem in rural areas of Peru. And I know that this is shared by educational projects around the world that work in rural areas. And then after 10 years, and a very successful 10 years, fortunately, working with the communities, with local authorities, we decided to move into the next phase of our work, which is then to work with these young people who are graduating school and making sure that they can move into further or higher education. Peru has 80% of informality in terms of employment rate. And I think that that's one specific area that we're trying to tackle, is to make sure that young people are able to get a professional degree, whether it be from an institute or a university. But our goal is to make sure that they have access to a degree or a profession of their choice, and that they're then able to insert themselves into formal employment. And as a result, we feel strongly that they would then be able to break away from a very hard, extreme cycle of poverty that they would otherwise be trapped in. So that is really what we strive to do. That is what we've been doing for the last few years as our main flagship project. It's called the Transitions Project. We work in the Andean region of Cusco. We work in the Amazon region of Iquitos with different communities with very different needs, but all focused on supporting young people in their final years of school to then move into further education and support themselves and their families and communities as they strive to develop in such a difficult context.
You're also very, very humble a lot about your work and about your experiences much of the time, but the stuff that you do is quite incredible, truly. And you're also an organization who tracks the people who do your programs, and you follow with them, and you really make sure that your impact is long lasting and sustainable. Could you maybe share some of the incredible success stories that have come out in your projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is true. We have worked hard to try and implement a monitoring and evaluation system that is such a buzzword for people in development projects, but it's such an important part of what we do. We have to make sure that the impact is what they want, but first and foremost, and secondly, that it fits with what we're trying to do as a whole, as a project. We currently work with around 100 young people. That's our current population, both counting those in the Andes region and the Amazon. However, the project has been running for a long, long time. And in total, we've had over 180 young people go through the projects, all now at different stages. Some are graduating from university institutes, some are already employed, some are just starting out. Two success stories that really moved me, and I think that are such a good example of why this project is so important. I've spoken about her so much over the years, but Marlene Quispe is the first young woman to graduate from our boarding house project and move into university, and then graduate from university and then be employed. And her story is the reason why it's so powerful to us is because this was when we were first starting out, and she nearly dropped out of school altogether because of the long distances she had to walk. We made sure that she came to our boarding houses. She had so much potential. She then graduated from secondary school, got into university through a government scholarship, became the very first young woman from her community and from our projects to even get a scholarship. And she then graduated as a school teacher. She studied education. And she then went on to become a teacher at local communities in Cusco. She's already been working for a few years in different communities as a secondary school teacher. I believe she's recently become a mum. She is just the most special person, and such a good example of how all it is that young people need sometimes is just an opportunity. It's just access. They have the potential. They have what it takes. It's just sometimes, unfortunately, whether it be for political reasons or whatnot, sometimes they just don't have access to it. And that's one that really is so special to me as well, because of the last 9 years that I've been with the organization. I've seen the process. And then Juvenal is a young boy who a couple of years ago graduated from our projects. He got a degree in food processing industries, and he did an internship at a couple of factories, and he's now a plant manager for another factory. I think they work with dairy products, but he's a plant manager at this factory. And I think something we have to realize is that a lot of these young people, if not all of them, come from families where a lot of the time their parents are even illiterate, and they didn't have access to finish primary school. And it's such a powerful tool for them to have finished their education and to now be employed and even be in positions of leadership within their employment role. So there are many, but those are two that I think really mean a lot to us and prove that these young people are so resilient and have so much potential to follow their dreams.
Wow. I mean, Sara, I think we, in this field where we work with NGOs and a lot of nonprofits, we hear a lot about how opportunity is so important. But I think hearing stories like that is what really makes us realize what kind of difference those opportunities make. You just said it helps break out of the poverty cycle, but it really creates generational impact on whole communities. So it's quite impressive, the things that you accomplish. And you've been doing this for a long time. You've had 10 years of experience in fundraising and leading social development projects. Can you tell me about some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
I think there are many. I think people sometimes have a view about social work in general as it being almost just rewarding in every sense of the term. And in many ways, absolutely it is. I mean, of course it is, to know that you can work alongside people, support their lives, and in return learn so much. And I mean, that is incredible in itself. But I actually think that a couple of challenges we've had, specifically from the fundraising side of things, I think one of them has been fundraising from a strength perspective. That's challenging in the sense that a lot of nonprofits, I'm happy to say less and less, have always banked on this idea of raising funds or appealing to people from a perspective of pity or weakness, or people having to feel sorry for whether it be children or women or just general groups of people. And we've always been on the complete opposite side of the spectrum on this. We feel that that is not only unjust, but a complete wrong interpretation and misconception of who these people are. I always ask the same thing. Would you like a certain photo or video of you being put out in the world that you didn't approve of, or you didn't like? I think we have to treat everyone with the same level of respect, particularly in fundraising. And sometimes when you fundraise from a strength perspective, donors view it as you're not as needy, or you don't have the same needs as others. And that is far from the truth. It's just that we are looking to put out information and talk about our projects from what we truly believe is a place and our groups of people that have a lot more to teach us than probably we do to them. However, that doesn't mean that we don't have to work with them to develop projects, to support them and to improve their quality of life. So that's a challenge, I think, from a fundraising perspective. And I'd say another one is to probably invest in teams. And within the social development and nonprofit sector, I think that a lot of the time there is, again, a misconception that people that work in this do it on a voluntary basis only, or, donations must only go directly to project costs. And I think what people don't realize is that, like any other sector of work, people need to grow, people need to prepare, people need to learn. And it's the same within the nonprofit sector. And I think that, again, from a fundraising perspective, a lot of the time it's hard to get that message across and get people support your team members, who will then be in a much stronger position to develop and deliver much more efficient projects. So those are two things that I'd probably say are quite challenging, and I think that they're starting to be addressed in the social development world. I definitely feel like I'm coming across it a lot more now. So again, I do hope that with time, people are a lot more aware of these issues and a bit more empathetic when it comes to this.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a challenge that many nonprofits have faced. And maybe you're right that it's changing because the public is becoming a little bit more aware. As of before, no one really knew where the donations were coming and going. No one really cared truly. It was more about feeling good maybe, or providing something that you think is good. Now it's a lot more about transparency, and here you're not only providing change and help, but also dignity to people who you're working with, which is really, really important and incredibly impressive. You mentioned about funding. I think it's truly difficult to put all of your budget towards only the projects, because some of the biggest projects that work have really great marketing, and you can't really say that you're fundraising for marketing for projects, although that's something that really, really helps. And I guess that's kind of where our interest also lie, that when we organize large events or forums, sometimes it brings much needed attention to a project, but it also helps raise awareness and targets so many different things. And it's kind of how we started working together initially. Larry, could you tell us a little bit about how this upcoming forum that we're doing came about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just like to say, I think you're right. Resources are so limited in the nonprofit sector. Unless you're part of a much wider network of organizations, it is quite challenging, particularly an organization like ours that really was born out of a very small seed project, and it grew over time. everything that like communications and marketing and all of that comes together like it would in a lot of other different jobs in different sectors. So it is important to talk about these things and again, have people be aware of them. I think it makes the whole process of donating, but also receiving donations a lot more transparent, like you say. And that is really very important when it comes to people getting involved in projects. The forum, the upcoming forum, my colleague Tilo and I, who have worked together for many years, were thinking about what themes would be interesting, but also quite challenging and fun to discuss on a global platform. It's hard sometimes to think about what other projects or other organizations want to talk about when you're so, I guess, trapped in your own projects and the day-to-day aspect of your work. But we have always been so interested and have always found heritage to be such a fundamental part of our work and the identity of the young people that we work with, both in the Andes and in the Amazon. And it just occurred to us that it could be really interesting to hear about this from other people from different countries around the world, academics, people at all different levels of social development that have something to share that has to do with cultural heritage and education projects, how they intertwine, maybe how difficult it is. And I think to get those experiences from people outside of our own South American context is really why we came up with this idea, because we think it really is such an integral part of our work.
It truly is. And when you brought this up, I think initially we started off with kind of a small forum idea, a small initiative, but then you were really smart to kind of be like, hey guys, can we connect with the other hubs, the other organizations, see what they think? And there was quite a strong resonance within cultural heritage, and so many of the organizations were kind of thinking the same thing. It is globalization versus keeping your own identity and cultural heritage. It was colonization and decolonization. It was the preservation of language, but also integrating into the global scene. So it seems like this really resonates with different communities and countries all over the world. And the problems, although in different contexts, are very, very similar. So it's quite interesting that this topic is so hot right now, but is also being addressed without necessarily all of the organizations realizing that they're working in this area within a specific kind of cultural identity.
Yeah, do you know what I think makes it so interesting is that in many ways it's quite broad. It allows for you to look at the theme and approach it from however you feel it should be approached, whether it's from your own personal work experience or whether it's just from perceptions you have, or if you're an academic, what you've studied or what you've researched. And I think that I feel so privileged to work with people like Tilo and just in general with everyone in my organization and the communities we work with, because if it wasn't for them, I probably would never have thought of the importance of this. This comes out of our years of working in the field and making sure that cultural identity is, again, at the very forefront of our work. And I think that is why it resonates so much with people, because one way or another, this has had to have been an important part of their work, again, from whatever angle they come at this. So I think that I'm very excited to think about just the range of voices, of theories, of ideas that are going to come out of this forum. And I think that if anything else, it just provides a space for people to have shared about how cultural heritage should resonate within education. That in itself is such an achievement for the forum.
Quite inspiring, it's really making me excited about all the things to come, about all of the sessions and the speakers and the new things that we're about to learn. Are there any sessions that or speakers maybe that you're particularly interested in hearing from?
Gosh, that's quite difficult. I think there are a couple that I'm particularly interested in, one of them being Safina Hussein from Educate Girls. I know she's going to approach her session from a gender perspective. That is one of my absolute weaknesses in social development. I have always championed and got behind any sort of approach or investigation or research that has to do with bridging the gender gap. So I'm very interested in that. I know Teach for All are also going to do a really interesting talk on decolonization and re-indigenization. I think that will be so interesting, again, for people like myself who do work currently with Indigenous communities. And OMEP, such a fantastic organization, they're going to be leading a session in Spanish that is going to be about language and culture, which is a really quite a huge part of cultural heritage. And it will be something that we talk about in our session as well with Amantani and our panel discussion. So there are so many from different corners of the world that it's hard to choose, but those are some of the ones that stand out for me for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, you're very familiar with the program as well, considering that you're also one of the organizers. You're communicating with all of the partners who spoke Spanish. So thank you so much for that. You've made our life a lot easier for sure and brought in so many incredible ideas. And you mentioned that kind of the gender gap as well. I think Amantani itself has worked with artisans that contribute to women's financial independence. Can you maybe elaborate a little on that as well?
Yes, we do. For the last several years, we've been working with the women from the communities in the Andes. We haven't extended this project to the Amazon yet because we have spent most of our time the last few years in the Andes. And we work with these women in hand weaving products that we're then able to sell in shops across the UK and in Peru and anywhere else in the world where we can potentially find space for them. The objective is really to, first of all, provide a space for people to buy and own some of these amazing pieces of weaving and some of these products that are so special to their culture as well. But it is also about providing financial independence for women, the communities where they are from, the patriarchal society that they grow up in, the gender hierarchy is very much in place, unfortunately, in many respects, and they don't always have access as women to make money of their own in whatever this may be. So we feel strongly that if we can help provide that space alongside our educational projects, then we must, and we do. And we've been working for them for many years. We work with 40 at the moment, 40 artisans, and they weave bracelets, hats, bag tags, glasses holders, different things that not only are beautiful, but really do mean a lot for them. And it creates a big impact in their community. The biggest one being that actually men in their community start viewing them differently. And that really is the ultimate goal of projects like these, providing a platform for women to have the independence that they need, but also make sure that they're viewed differently and that those structures change over time.
That's truly incredible and empowering. I've seen some of the products and they really are beautiful. I think I'd love some myself. Do you think we can have a link that we can attach to this video on the podcast so that people can go ahead and maybe purchase some of the products from these women?
Absolutely. It should be accessible directly on our website, at least the contact information, the person who you'd be able to contact for something like this. It is a small project. We are more than able and willing and are looking for partners out there that would maybe like to have these products in their shops, whether they have shops themselves or know people, or maybe just want to have them as, we've even had people give them out as wedding gifts. So many different ways in which the products can get out there, and to know that you're supporting these women. And at the end of the day, our organization means a lot. So for sure, on our website, there should be a direct link to our ethical trade project, and if at the very least, definitely contact information of people you can email about it.
Amazing. And the link is amantani.org.uk. Is that correct?
Right. Our website is amantani.org.uk. There is a Spanish version of that, which would be .org.pe. But yes, that is our main website. We also have our LinkedIn and Instagram pages. I believe we also have a Facebook page. They should all be called Amantani UK. And we have someone in our team there working hard every day trying to engage with people on all of these different platforms. So please, if you are interested, whether it's just in the projects or the actual products, you can reach out on any of those and we'll be in touch very quickly.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we actually have a little section here called Hot Seat Questions for our speakers. Would you answer some of those questions for me? You don't have to think too hard about them, just kind of the first thing that comes to your mind. Amazing.
Okay, I'll do my best.
All right, so what's your favorite Peruvian dish?
Oh, easy, ceviche.
What kind of ceviche?
Well, it has to be fish, of course, preferably served on the coast of the north of the country on a very hot day by the seaside.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Take me there, please. If you could have dinner with any historical figure from Peru or anywhere else in the world, who would they be and why?
Okay, I've thought of this before because this is the sort of question that sometimes comes up at different points in your life. So from a Peruvian perspective, I always say the same person. It has to be Maria Jesus Alvarado Rivera. She was the first Peruvian woman back in somewhere between 1910 and 1915. She was the first woman to advocate for equal rights and not someone that is spoken about enough, frankly. And then I think on the sort of same wavelength, I'd have to go with one of the suffragettes. So Emmeline Pankhurst, probably from the British suffragette movement. I think that dinner would be incredible because it would be two women from completely different eras that both were pioneering gender equal rights for women. And I think that, that would be an incredible dinner party for me.
That truly sounds quite exciting and seems like some incredible plans would come out of that dinner party. Served in with some ceviche.
Even better.
Do you have a book that has inspired your work?
I don't know about inspired my work necessarily, but I think a book that I read a few years ago that has always held quite a special place in my heart is a book called Half the Sky, How to Change the World. It's about the different stories about women in different parts of Asia and Africa that have overcome some seriously difficult, challenging times, particularly, violation of human rights. And it's a hard book to read in terms of the level of detail in some of the stories. But the reason why I mention it is because they always come out with how they overcame this, the ideas that they had, the projects they developed, who they worked alongside. I really think that it does inspire me in many ways because I feel so connected to the work that some of these people tried back then to achieve and continue to do so. And any story that can talk about people coming from extremely difficult circumstances and prevailing against all odds is something that, again, resonates a lot with, I think, the rest of us that have decided to dedicate our lives to social development.
It really puts some of my favorite books to shame. So truly, your aspirations and vision and everything else is so incredibly inspiring that it really wants you to, get up and do something, which I guess is one of the really important things. Maybe could you, as we're coming to an end, could you also maybe tell us a little bit about how people can get involved and support the work of Amantani?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, one immediate way that you can support what we do is get to know us, get to know what we're doing. Please go on our website, contact us, read our reports about the different things we've been doing over the years. That is really, we put a lot of effort into the reports and the different pieces of information that we put out there because it's very important for us, for people to learn about how we put the information together, who we're working with, learn about some more, more success stories like Marlene and Juvenal. There are so many. That's the first thing I always ask people to do is just learn about us and ask as many questions as you want. I think that that's something we don't do enough. Going back to my inquisitive nature, it really means a lot for people to ask us how we do it, why we do it, what we're going to do. These are all ways to engage. And again, if it's something that you're really passionate about and you would like to get behind, for sure, becoming monthly donors, that could be anything from $1 a month. Everything helps our projects because we do rely on fundraising in different ways, and having monthly donations or having different people come on board, whether it be through the Ethical Trade Project, supporting the women with the products, there are so many different ways. Run a marathon representing us, climb a mountain, write a song. So many ways nowadays where we can support projects and organizations in creative ways. It's not just about becoming monthly donors. It really is about how you can engage long-term with an organization like ours. But first things first, join our different social media pages, visit our website, contact us. We are so excited to talk to people from around the world who want to know more about Peru, want to know more about our projects, and more importantly, want to learn from the young people that we work with.
Amazing. We're definitely getting involved, and then EdHeroes is already involved. We'll see if we can engage people to really support your work. And to end this interview, could you please share a Peruvian proverb that really resonates with you?
Yes, there is a saying that actually goes way back when to the Incan Empire, and it was a fundamental part of their society. And it was a phrase that throughout my history classes growing up in Peru, just even nowadays, you often hear about it. And it's in Quechua, and it's Amasua, Amayuya, Amakeya. And what that translates to is don't steal, don't lie, don't be lazy. And I've always found that to be such an interesting expression from a civilization from such a long time ago that was so hardworking. And I don't know why, it's just always resonated with me. And I find it to be is quite a strict saying, but ultimately what it talks about is just, be good.
Yeah.
And I think that be good and do something. And I think that at the end of the day is probably why it still means so much to people now.
Yeah, it seems like it's the fundamental building blocks of community building and of just generally, exactly like you said, being a good person.
Absolutely.
Right, Sara, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible journey, your insights, all of the work that Amantani does, and talking a little bit about the upcoming EdHeroes Global Forum that is co-organized with Amantani. So,
no, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really been great to talk about all these things. And yes, to anyone listening, please join us on July 11th at this incredible forum with so many different people and different voices from around the world. We hope to welcome as many people from every corner of the world as possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, don't forget to check out the EdHeroes Global Forum. Visit global.edheroes.forum for more details and to register. Until next time, and stay inspired and keep making a difference. Thank you.